It was a deluge that day. Not the gentle patter of a summer shower, but a relentless, hammering downpour that seemed determined to scrub the very paint off the world. I was holed up in a grimy roadside diner, the kind with two broken coffee machines and a single buzzing neon sign, watching my last clean shirt tumble in a perpetually damp dryer. All I craved was a hot black coffee, but instead, I got her. She materialized in the doorway, a shimmering specter of water and desperation, mascara streaks rivulating down her prominent cheekbones. In her hands, she clutched a photo, a relic from another life, one I'd never seen before. My breath hitched. I didn't utter her name. I didn't ask how she'd found this desolate corner of the map. I just stared, too numb to process. "Elian," she breathed, her voice a fragile whisper, as if testing the reality of my presence. "Please don't walk away again." Too late, I thought. I'd walked away a year ago. I offered no reply, my gaze fixed on the image. It captured our third anniversary, a fleeting moment of unguarded joy. Her infectious laughter, my arm around her, a single candle bravely standing atop a store-bought cake because I'd forgotten the rest. A scene I'd believed was mine alone. Sacred. Now it felt like a weapon, and the singular thought burning through my mind was, who gave this to her? Because the stark truth was, I hadn't just vanished. I'd meticulously erased myself. New name, cash payments, a deliberately untraceable path. After the sting of her betrayal, after the whispers I'd overheard that night, I knew staying meant a slow, agonizing demise. And here she stood, drenched, pleading for a forgiveness she simply didn't deserve. But here's the part that will utterly shatter your perception of reality. Her arrival wasn't the most staggering event of that day. That honor belonged to what unfolded precisely 10 minutes later when the diner door groaned open once more. I hadn't spoken a single word, hadn't even consciously drawn a breath. My mind was still reeling, trying to comprehend how Blythe Landry had somehow tracked me to this chip-tile, perpetually damp haven of forgotten dreams in the middle of nowhere, brandishing that accursed photograph like it held irrefutable proof of something. Then the bell above the door chimed, and time itself seemed to stretch. He entered, commanding the space with an almost unsettling ease. Tall, impeccably groomed, buttoned into a charcoal gray overcoat, the kind that silently announced a fortune. His gaze didn't find me first. It impaled her, and she flinched. That minute, a clarity sharper than any blade pierced through a year of fog. She flinched like a cornered liar, like a thief caught red-handed. He offered her no greeting, no explanation. He simply handed her a crisp, dry folder, acknowledged my presence with a curt nod, and turned, dissolving back into the storm. She didn't pursue him. She didn't weep. She merely stood there, now clutching the folder instead of the photograph. And for the very first time since I'd known her, a genuine, primal fear contorted her usually composed features. "What's in that?" I managed, my voice a stranger's rasp. She remained silent, eventually sinking into the booth opposite me, as if we were two weary travelers waiting for a delayed train. Finally, she whispered, "I swear, Elian, I didn't know he'd come here too." I didn't believe her. Not anymore. I had poured too much belief into too many of her stories. The late-night meetings were always client-related. The locked phone was just a privacy thing. Her whispered goodnight kisses felt like ash in my mouth, while another man's scent clung to her skin. And now here we were again, a chasm of unspoken secrets, with that damning folder resting between us. She slid it towards me, a slow, deliberate motion, as if the contents might bite. My hand trembled as I reached for it. Inside there were no passionate letters, no incriminating photos, no tearful confessions. Just a single printed document, a medical record. Lab results, my name, a diagnosis date, and a single highlighted line that stole the air from my lungs. Patient unaware. She had known for an entire year and had said nothing. The paper felt impossibly heavy. I stared at that brutal line, patient, unaware, as if it were written in a foreign script, willing it to vanish or rewrite itself into something less horrifying. It stubbornly remained, a cruel yellow beacon illuminating an unspeakable truth. Apparently, I had been diagnosed with a hereditary heart condition 10 months prior. 10 months. I had never seen a doctor about this specific issue. I had never received any results. I hadn't even suspected anything was amiss. But she had. And somehow the lab had mistakenly routed the report to her email instead of mine. Ready to learn the shocking truth behind her silence? I don't know what jolted me more, the diagnosis itself or the chilling realization that she had harbored this knowledge, keeping it from me. Not when I'd collapsed on the porch last winter, blaming it on simple dehydration. Not when I'd started waking up gasping for breath. She had looked me in the eye every single day, asking if I wanted another slice of pizza, all while meticulously maintaining the charade that everything was perfectly fine. When I finally lifted my gaze, she had her head buried in her hands, rocking gently, muttering to herself like a broken record. I didn't want to scare you. I thought if I pretended it wasn't real, it wouldn't be real. That was her excuse, as if I were a fragile child incapable of handling the truth, as if I hadn't been navigating her carefully constructed web of lies for years. I demanded to know what the man from earlier had to do with any of this. She just shook her head, trembling. He used to be my therapist. I called him when you left. I didn't know he still had the results. He promised he'd never breach your privacy, but I guess he changed his mind. Something inside me snapped then, not with a furious, explosive crack, but a quiet, chilling severance, the kind of break that makes no sound until it's far too late to mend. I stood, walked out into the torrent without my shirt, my hoodie forgotten. She followed, barefoot, calling my name, over and over, as if it still held meaning. But I kept walking, because that was the precise moment I understood. I hadn't just disappeared to escape her infidelity. I had vanished to save my life, and she had almost taken it anyway, just slower. I had no destination. I walked until the rain soaked through my worn shoes, until the bruised sky bled from bruised gray to impenetrable black. I didn't care who saw me or what street swallowed me whole. Every stride away from that diner felt like shedding a layer of skin that had been rotting beneath the surface for years. I thought about the medical report clutched in my back pocket, still damp from her hands. I thought about all the times she had kissed me, knowing I was slowly, unknowingly, dying. But the most insidious thought, the one I couldn't shake, was the chilling suspicion that perhaps, just perhaps, she had planned it that way. I understand how that sounds, paranoid, delusional. But when you've been gaslit for so long, doubt isn't an emotion. It's a reflex. Everything she had ever done suddenly shimmered with a new, sinister light. The vitamin bottles she had insisted I stop taking. The way she had made me skip that follow-up appointment because they always find something to worry about. The morning she'd feigned annoyance when I complained about my chest tightening. All of it, like fragmented puzzle pieces I never knew I was holding, now clicking into a terrifying picture. And her sudden appearance, finding me after a year of complete silence, dragging the past with her like an unshakable ghost. It didn't feel like love. It felt like strategy. I ended up in a bus station restroom, staring at my reflection under the sickly glow of a flickering fluorescent light. I looked like a discarded shell, pale, hollow-eyed, my lips cracked from the cold. I didn't recognize the man in the mirror, but I recognized the stark terror in his eyes. And that realization terrified me more than anything else. Because if she could find me once, she could find me again. And if I didn't start fighting back, not physically, but with cunning and intellect, I was going to simply fade out of existence before I ever had the chance to truly live. I needed answers, proof, a definitive timeline. Not just about the affair, but about what she knew and exactly when. I had remained silent for too long, so I made a decision. I used the last of my meager cash to buy a burner phone. I was done hiding. If she desired a reunion, she was going to get one. But this time, I would be the one asking the questions, and she wouldn't like any of the answers. The cheap burner phone felt flimsy in my hand, as if it might shatter if I gripped it too hard. Yet it offered something I hadn't felt in months: leverage. I sat on a hard plastic bench in that desolate station, staring at the cracked screen, debating whether to call her or not. In the end, I didn't have to. She called me. She knew I'd buy a phone. She knew I'd be too consumed by curiosity to walk away without digging deeper. "You're angry," she stated the moment I answered. Her voice was too calm, too unnervingly controlled. I offered no response. "I deserve that," she added quickly, then whispered, "but I also deserve to tell you the truth." I granted her one chance, one question. "How long were you planning to keep me in the dark about the diagnosis?" Her silence wasn't born of shock. It was calculated. Then she uttered something that fundamentally reshaped every memory I held. "I wasn't going to tell you. Not unless you left me first." The words hit me like a physical blow. She didn't stutter. She didn't cry. She simply delivered it as if it were a perfectly rational strategy at the time. "I didn't want you to leave and use it as an excuse to disappear. You always run from pain, Elian. Always have." That's when the horrifying realization dawned. She had completely rewritten the narrative of our entire marriage in her own mind. In her twisted version, I was the weak one. I was dramatic. I was the one who needed protection, not from the illness itself, but from reality. She believed her betrayal had been a necessary act, perhaps even merciful. I asked her if the affair had anything to do with it. She laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "No, that was separate," she said, as if untangling a knot of wires. "You were already slipping away before him. I just moved on faster." This is the moment everything changed. Something inside me didn't just snap from heartbreak. That wound had already been mourned. What shattered was the final illusion. It was clarity. Pure, sharp, undeniable clarity. She had meticulously rewritten our shared story to cast herself as the hero, the victim even. But I had lived it, and now I was ready to reclaim every single page. After that call, sleep was an impossibility. I sat on the stained carpet of a cheap motel room, watching the second hand on the clock twitch forward while my thoughts spiraled in 1,000 dizzying directions. She had claimed the affair was separate, as if it existed in a sealed box, entirely disconnected from the way she treated me. But I couldn't dislodge the thought of how swiftly she'd said it, how quickly she tried to diminish its significance. That's when I knew I had to find the man. The one she moved on with. I didn't seek revenge, I craved information. If I had been so utterly blind for so long, perhaps he could illuminate what I had consistently failed to see. So I dug. I scoured old voicemails she'd left on our shared cloud account, the one she'd likely forgotten about. I sifted through metadata on photos she'd posted before I left. Eventually, I found it. A gym tag tucked into the corner of a mirror selfie, dated 3 weeks before our anniversary. A location I recognized. I remembered her coming home that day, complaining of sore legs, gushing about her new instructor, killing her in the best way. The man's name was Declan Rourke. Who names their kid Declan Rourke? Anyway, I walked into that gym the next day, not to confront him, but simply to observe him, to understand what could possibly compel her to throw away everything for someone who looked like a walking, breathing protein bar. He didn't recognize me, of course, but I recognized the practiced charm in his voice as he flirted with the receptionist, the same low, seductive timbre he had likely used on Blythe. It wasn't personal, it was a performance. I left without speaking to him, but the oppressive weight in my chest didn't ease. Back at the motel, I opened my laptop and dared to check something I hadn't before. Her email. I still knew the password. She hadn't changed it. And sitting there, stark and unopened, was a recent thread labeled Urgent Final Results. The sender wasn't a doctor. It was a law firm. I clicked, and my blood ran colder than the winter rain outside. The file was a pending claim. Not for me, for her. And the reason? Malpractice related to withheld medical information and wrongful death. She was meticulously preparing a case. Not for me to win, for her, in case I didn't survive. What I'm about to show you is a truth more unsettling than any fiction. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing until the motel room began to spin. I reread the file again and again, desperately hoping I was misinterpreting something, that it was old, a mistake, something utterly unrelated. But every single word confirmed the horrifying truth. She had already hired an attorney. The case was real. The potential payout was real. And the detail that utterly obliterated what little was left of me. The date. The paperwork had been initiated 6 months before. I even found out about the diagnosis, meaning she wasn't reacting to my disappearance. She was actively preparing for my death while I was still lying beside her in bed. I don't know how long I sat there. Perhaps hours, perhaps the entire night. At one point I started laughing, not because it was funny, but because I had reached a level of disbelief that completely fractured something inside me. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. This was about survival. She hadn't just lied. She had monetized the very risk of my silence. I began pacing, meticulously replaying every memory like a detective reviewing evidence from a crime he didn't realize he was the victim of. The supplements she'd casually thrown away, the accidental skipped checkups, the times she'd told my mother I was probably just tired from work after I'd collapsed at Thanksgiving. And I had believed her. I had allowed her to control the narrative. I had given her the benefit of the doubt over and over again, while she was quietly building a legal safety net in case I flatline. That isn't love. That is strategy, cold, surgical, ruthless. I sent the file to myself. Then at a gas station kiosk, I printed it, folded it carefully into an envelope, and in shaky black ink, wrote 3 words across the front. In case I vanish. I mailed it to my brother with no return address. He and I hadn't spoken in years, not since the bitter fallout over the family inheritance. But he was still blood. If something happened to me now, someone had to know. I didn't care about justice anymore. I just wanted to ensure she couldn't bury the truth along with me. When I walked out of that station, the world felt colder than it had in days. And for the first time since I'd vanished, I was ready to face her. Not to make peace, but to drag every ugly truth out into the blinding light and see what she did when there was nowhere left to hide. I met her at a nondescript diner just outside the city, one of those places that still carried the ghost of cigarette smoke from decades past. She sat in a corner booth, waiting, her hands clasped around a mug she hadn't touched. When I slid into the seat opposite her, she looked up as if staring at a phantom. And in many ways, perhaps she was. The version of me she used to know. The man who flinched at confrontation, who swallowed pain like bitter medicine. That man was gone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shed a single tear. I simply placed the printed copy of the legal claim on the table between us and let it speak for itself. Her face drained of all color. For once, she had no lie ready, just silence. And that was all the confirmation I needed. I'm not here for revenge, I told her, my voice steady, clear. I'm here for the truth. And after this, I never want to see you again. She tried to explain. Of course she did. Words like fear, confusion, depression, all the usual tools manipulators deploy to decorate their decisions. But I didn't care. My healing wasn't going to come from her apology. It was going to come from finally reclaiming my own story. I stood up, thanked her for revealing exactly who she was, and walked out. Not in rage, but in something far more potent. Peace. That was 6 months ago. I live in a quiet town now, a place where people know your name and offer a friendly wave from their porches. I work at a mechanic shop, finding a profound satisfaction in fixing things with my hands after years of feeling invisible behind a screen. The diagnosis? Real, but entirely manageable. I've embraced new habits, committed to consistent checkups, and my new doctor assures me my prognosis is solid. I even started volunteering at a local youth center, helping kids who grew up believing that silence was safer than speaking up. Sometimes people ask if I miss her, but I don't miss someone who only mourned my absence when it threatened her own comfort. I don't regret disappearing. My only regret is waiting so long to finally do it. And now I'm building something new. Not to prove her wrong, but to prove to myself that I was never weak for leaving. I was finally strong enough to choose me,